I still remember that night very clearly, the night I realized I no longer existed in my own family. Not because they said it to my face, but because they had erased me quietly. It was Saturday night, right before Mother's Day. I was sitting alone in my small apartment in the suburbs of Virginia, my laptop half open beside a stack of fourth-grade tests, when my phone buzzed close to midnight. The caller was Olivia Carter, my cousin. I answered before I could say anything. Her voice was already shaking. "Olivia, I don't know if I should tell you this, but you need to know." My heart stopped for a second. "What happened?" "Check WhatsApp, the family group." I opened the app, scrolled down, then froze. The group Carter Family Dinner, the one that used to include all of us, the one we had used to plan every holiday for the past 3 years. I was no longer in it. "They removed you," Emily whispered as if she was afraid of hearing the words herself. I didn't answer. I just stared at the screen. But that was not the worst part. A series of screenshots came through. Messages from my mother, sent in the family group. Before I was removed, reminder: Mother's Day dinner at Jefferson Restaurant, 7 p.m. All my children will be there, all the successful ones. I stopped at the next line. Olivia chose to become a teacher. I no longer consider her my daughter. Do not mention her name tomorrow. No one objected. My sister only reacted with a heart. My brother replied, "Understood, Mom." That was all. If you have ever had a moment when you realized you no longer belonged in the place that used to be your whole world, comment 1. I want to know if you have ever felt that too. I sat frozen on the edge of my bed, my phone still glowing in my hand. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone back. There was only a silence so long that I could hear every beat of my own heart. I read those messages again that night. 47 times. Not because I didn't understand them, but because some part of me was still trying to find another meaning, some reason, some missing context. But there was none. The truth was simple. My family had decided to erase me, not because I had done anything wrong, but because I had chosen a path that made them ashamed. And in that moment, I understood something. I could call my mother. I could show up at the restaurant the next day and walk in as if nothing had happened. I could beg for an explanation. But I did none of those things. I simply made a quiet decision. If they wanted me to disappear, then I would disappear. But this time, I would do it my way. I was born into a family that outsiders always called perfect. A colonial-style house in a quiet suburb of Virginia, a lawn trimmed down to the last millimeter glass doors that were always spotless, and inside it family dinners that looked like the very picture of success. My mother, Margaret Carter, had once been a senior manager at a major bank. She retired early not because she needed rest, but because she had finally achieved the things she had been chasing her entire life. A place in the elite Westbrook Club. It was a world where business cards mattered more than character, and a person's profession determined their worth. In my mother's world, everything had to be something to be proud of. My older sister, Victoria Carter, was a well-known plastic surgeon in Richmond. Her photos always appeared at charity galas, a glass of champagne in her hand, a watch glittering on her wrist, that was worth enough to pay my rent for several years. My brother, Daniel Carter, was a corporate lawyer in Washington, D.C. He drove a luxury SUV, showed up to every family gathering in a perfectly tailored suit, and spoke as if the entire world operated according to the contracts he signed. And then there was me, Olivia Carter, the youngest child, the only one who did not fit. I was a fourth-grade teacher at a small elementary school nearly 150 kilometers from my mother's house. The car I drove was more than 10 years old. My apartment could have fit inside Victoria's walk-in closet, but none of that had ever been a problem. until it became a problem for my mother. I did not choose teaching because I had no other options. Few people knew that I had once had an almost perfect GPA and a full scholarship to study medicine at the University of Virginia. The same path Victoria had taken 10 years before me. My mother had already told all her friends about her second daughter who was about to become a doctor. Everything had been decided. Until that summer, I joined a free reading camp for underprivileged children. That was where I met a boy named Marcus. He was 8 years old and could not read a first-grade passage fluently. People had told him he was slow, that he was not smart enough. 3 months later, he read all of Charlotte's Web by himself. The day he hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe, I understood something no medical school could ever teach me. That night I called my mother. I told her I was giving up the medical scholarship, that I wanted to study education, that I wanted to become a teacher. The line went silent. I still remember it exactly. 17 seconds. Then she spoke, her voice colder than anything I had ever heard from her before. You are destroying your own life. I thought it ended there. I was wrong. Because to my mother, my decision to become a teacher was not just a wrong choice. It was a stain on the perfect image she had spent her whole life building. And from that moment on, I was no longer her pride. I became something she had to explain. Every time someone asked about the other child, I thought that after that phone call, everything would eventually be okay. That my mother just needed time. That one day she would understand my choice was not a failure. But the truth was, she never even tried to understand. On the day of my college graduation, I still looked down at the audience, searching for a familiar face. I had imagined so many times that she would come, that she would sit somewhere in the crowd, maybe not smiling, but at least present. But the seats reserved for my family stayed empty. Later, I received a short message. I'm busy. There's an event at the club. Congratulations. No apology. No explanation. Just a notice, as if the most important day of my life was not worth changing her schedule for. Victoria sent me a card. Inside was a $50 check and one line. Good luck with your little job. I used that money to buy groceries for the week. But I never forgot the way she described my profession. Little job. I started teaching at an elementary school in the suburbs. There was no red carpet, no prestige, no one taking photos of me holding a glass of champagne. There were only children and their stories. There were days when I stayed in my classroom until 7 in the evening just to help a student who had fallen behind. There were days when I used my own money to buy books, crayons, and school supplies for my class. No one in my family knew any of that. And honestly, they did not care. Every time I went home for the holidays, I slowly realized I was no longer part of that picture. I was still there, but I was not truly seen. At Thanksgiving dinner that year, I walked into the dining room, carrying the roasted sweet potatoes my mother used to love. But my seat was not at the main table. It was at a small folding table in the corner beside the children. We just ran out of room, my mother said gently, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. You're good with children anyway. I was 30 years old, and I was eating dinner like a guest who had never really been invited. But even that was not the worst part. That Christmas, I spent 3 weeks knitting my mother a pale gray cashmere scarf in the exact color she loved. When she opened the box, she smiled. A very thin smile. Oh, handmade. Then she turned to Victoria, who had just given her a designer handbag, and spent nearly 20 minutes talking about the stitching, the material, and the brand. My scarf disappeared into her closet. 2 months later, I found it still wrapped in the tissue paper. Never used. I thought maybe I just needed to try a little harder. Maybe if I did better, became more successful, proved my worth, things would change. But I had failed to understand one very simple thing. In my mother's eyes, the problem was not that I was not good enough. It was that I had chosen wrong from the beginning. And to her, a wrong choice could never be repaired. After that Christmas, I began learning how to read the things no one said out loud. There were family calls I only heard about after everything was already over. There were weekend dinners I was never told about, only to see the photos Victoria posted online on Monday morning. In the pictures, my mother sat at the center of the table with Daniel and Victoria on either side of her. Behind them, wine glasses sparkled beneath the warm yellow lights. The caption was short: "Nothing matters more than family." I stared at that photo for a long time. Not because I wanted to sit beside them, but because I realized they had learned how to live normally in a world without me. No one left an empty chair. No one asked where I was. No one felt that anything was missing. At first, I told myself they had probably just forgotten. That my mother was getting older, Victoria was busy with surgeries, and Daniel was buried in work in Washington, D.C. I made excuses for them as if explaining their coldness would make it hurt less. Then came my mother's 60th birthday. I called her a week in advance to ask what she wanted me to bring. She said the plans were not final yet. 2 days later, I called again. She still said she would. That morning, I texted her a happy birthday message and asked what time the family dinner would be. Almost an hour later, she replied, "Oh, Olivia, I thought you were busy." The restaurant only had 6 seats left. Your father and I, Victoria, Daniel, Carolyn, and one of Victoria's friends. You understand, don't you? I read that message in the teacher's lounge between the clattering sound of an old coffee machine and the smell of warm printer paper. A coworker asked if I was okay. I smiled and said I was just a little tired. But inside, something had cracked. 6 seats. And in those 6 seats, one of Victoria's friends had a clearer place than I did. That evening, I did not go home right away. I drove around the small town near the school-passing houses with warm light spilling from their windows. I saw a mother bending down to tie her child's shoelace. I saw a father carrying a sleeping baby on his shoulder. They were such ordinary images that they should not have hurt anyone. But they hurt me. They hurt because I understood that I had not simply been left out of a dinner. I had been left out of the story my mother wanted to tell about her family. In that story, she had a daughter who was a doctor, a son who was a lawyer, elegant parties, upper-class friends, and a life worth admiring. And me? I was the detail that ruined the picture. An elementary school teacher with an old car, a small apartment, a modest salary, and hands often dusted with chalk. I was the person who made her explain. I was the uncomfortable question at afternoon teas whenever someone accidentally asked, "And what does your youngest daughter do?" So my mother chose the simplest solution. She acted as if I did not exist. I still tried to stay in touch for a while. I still sent cards on holidays. I still checked in when I heard my father's back was hurting. I still texted Victoria when she opened her new clinic. I still congratulated Daniel when he was promoted at his law firm. Most of those messages received only a few short words in return. Thank you. Okay. Too busy. Talk later. And after each one, I told myself not to expect too much. But a person cannot simply stop expecting love from the place they once called home. I thought I had gotten used to their coldness. I thought the missing seats, the late invitations, and the forgotten gifts were the final limit. I was wrong. Because another line was waiting for me ahead. And once they crossed it, I would no longer be able to lie to myself that this was only a misunderstanding. The night before Mother's Day that year was the last time I tried to believe my family was only distant. I had planned to call my mother the next morning. I thought maybe I should reach out one more time. Maybe one phone call would soften everything. But Emily's call came first, and after that came the screenshots. I do not know how to describe that feeling. It was not shock. It was not pain. It was a cold silence spreading through my whole body, as if someone had just turned off every sound in my world. I sat on the edge of my bed, my back against the wall, my phone screen glowing in the dark room. My mother's message was still there. Clear. Final. Impossible to misunderstand. I no longer consider her my daughter. I read that line again and again. Then I looked at the replies beneath it. Victoria. A heart reaction. Daniel understood Mom. Just 2 lines. But they were enough to erase 30 years of my existence in that family. If you have ever felt your own family turn their backs on you, not through direct words, but through silent agreement, comment, I understand. Sometimes silence hurts more than an insult. I did not cry. That surprised me the most. I thought I would collapse, call someone, do something just to release the pain. But I did not. I just sat there and watched everything fall apart in a strangely orderly way. Every memory, every dinner, every time I had tried to please them, all of it began arranging itself into one complete picture. And for the first time I saw it clearly. They had not accidentally forgotten me. They had not been busy. They had not ready. They had actively pushed me out. That message was only the final confirmation. I remember standing up, walking into the kitchen, and pouring myself a glass of water. My hands did not shake. My heart did not race. Everything felt terrifyingly normal. I went back to bed, opened the screenshots again, and saved them into a new folder on my phone. I named it Proof. I did not know why I did it. Maybe because some part of me understood that there are things you need to keep not for revenge but so you never doubt yourself again. I read those lines again that night. 47 times. Not because I had not accepted them, but because I was saying goodbye. Goodbye to the version of me that kept trying to be acknowledged. Goodbye to the belief that if I was good enough, they would love me. Goodbye to the family I had carried in my mind for 30 years. When the sun began to rise and light slipped through the curtains, I still had not slept. But I had made my decision. I did not call my mother. I did not text. I did not ask why. I opened my contact list and looked at each name. Margaret Carter. Victoria Carter. Danielle Carter. I paused for a few seconds. Then one by one I blocked every number. No announcement. No drama. No witnesses. Just one small action that completely cut the cord. If they had chosen to erase me from their lives, I would not stay there waiting to be added back. I disappeared. Not because I was weak, but because for the first time in my life, I chose myself. The first days after I blocked my entire family, nothing dramatic happened. No one showed up at my door. No calls from unknown numbers. No messages asking where I was. There was only silence. A kind of silence that at first felt like relief, but over time forced me to face something even harder to accept. They did not look for me. Even when I disappeared, no one asked. And yet life went on. I still went to class every morning. I still stood in front of the board, called out each student's name, and listened to their small, simple stories. There were days I was so exhausted, I just wanted to go home and sleep for hours. But the moment a child raised their hand to ask an innocent question, I found a reason to keep going. Slowly, the empty spaces inside me began to fill, not with my old family, but with entirely different people. And then I met Ethan Walker. It was a morning in October. I was taking my students on a field trip to a local farm. There was nothing special about it, until the bus stopped, and I saw him standing there leaning against a wooden fence, his hands still covered in soil. He was not the kind of man my mother would call successful. No suit. No luxury car. No stories to impress people at a club. But when he spoke to the children, when he patiently explained the smallest things, when he bent down to their eye level just to listen to them, I realized something. He saw the world the way I did. His daughter Lily was 5 years old. Her mother had passed away from illness a year before. I started tutoring Lily after school, and somehow those tutoring sessions slowly turned into longer conversations. I told Ethan the truth, that I no longer had a family, that I had been erased from the place where I was born. He did not ask too many questions. He only said one sentence I would never forget. Family is not about blood. It is about the people who stay when everyone else walks away. I did not believe it right away. But I began to try, little by little. 2 years later, we got married under a large oak tree on his farm. There were no hundreds of guests, no extravagant wedding dress, just a few close friends, and Lily standing between us holding flowers. That same year, I officially adopted her. I still remember the day Lily handed me a drawing in crayon, 3 figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Underneath in her uneven handwriting she had written, "Me mom. Me dad. Me." I kept that drawing in my desk drawer for years, because it was the first time I truly felt like I belonged somewhere. But that was not all. I continued my studies at night, working toward a master's degree while teaching during the day and writing papers after Lily had gone to sleep. There were nights I sat alone in the kitchen until 1 in the morning, my eyes burning, still pushing myself to finish one more page. No one from my old family knew. No one witnessed it. But this time, I did not need them to. 3 years later, I became the vice principal of the school. And then one day I applied for a position I did not even believe I could achieve. Director of Education for an entire district. I applied, almost on instinct. Not to prove anything to my old family, but because for the first time, I believed I deserved it. And what I did not expect was this. The life I had quietly built over 4 years was about to be pulled back into the light. I did not think my old family would find out. Honestly, during those 4 years, I had lived like someone who no longer existed in their world. No social media. No contact. No trace large enough for them to notice. Until my name appeared in the local newspaper. A small headline. Local teacher appointed Director of Education for Clark County. It was not national news. It was not something that made the whole city talk, but it was enough for someone in my family to see. I was in the kitchen making dinner with Ethan when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something made me pause and stare at the screen for a few seconds longer. Then I picked up. "Olivia, it's me." Victoria's voice. Sweet. Soft. So unfamiliar that I almost did not recognize it. I stayed silent for a few seconds. "I'm listening. I saw the news about you. Congratulations. Really, it's very impressive." I did not answer right away. Not because I did not know what to say, but because I was trying to remember the last time she had spoken to me in that tone. I could not remember. "Thank you," I said briefly. Victoria gave a small laugh as if everything between us had never been broken. "Mom saw it too. She's very happy. Honestly, she's so proud of you." I looked down at my hands. "Proud?" "Yes, I mean, she said she wants to see you. It has been so long since we all had dinner together. Mother's Day is coming up too. Maybe we should—" "Victoria." I cut her off. Not loudly. Not angrily. Just firmly enough to stop her from continuing. The other end went silent. 4 years, I said slowly. During those 4 years, did you ever miss me? Victoria did not answer right away. Olivia, things back then were complicated. No, I interrupted. They were not complicated. They were very clear. I heard her sigh softly on the other end. I know you're upset. I'm not upset. And I meant it. I had passed that stage a long time ago. I'm just no longer in the same place as all of you. That sentence left both of us silent. After a while, Victoria changed her tone. Olivia, I think you're misunderstanding this. Mom never meant to, cut you out. She was just stressed at the time and said things she didn't mean. Every family has moments like that. I gave a quiet laugh. Not because it was funny, but because I realized something. They still had not changed. They were not calling because they missed me. They were not calling because they regretted anything. They were calling because I had finally become a version of myself they could accept. I have one question, I said. What is it? If I were still just an ordinary teacher with no newspaper article and no new title, would you have called me? The other end went completely silent. No answer. And I no longer needed one. Have a good evening, Victoria, I said. Then I hung up. Ethan was standing at the kitchen doorway. He did not ask who had called. He just looked at me for a moment and asked gently, Are you okay? I nodded. Not the kind of nod meant to hide pain, but a clear, honest truth. Better than I thought. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, I opened the proof folder on my phone again. The old message was still there. Unchanged. Still real. But the way I felt when I looked at it was different. 4 years earlier, it had broken me. Now, it was only a reminder. A reminder that some doors close for a reason. And not every door that opens again is worth walking through. 3 days after Victoria's call, I received an email. The sender was my mother. I stared at the name Margaret Carter on the screen for almost a full minute before opening it. Not because I still had hope, but because some names, no matter how far you have gone, can still pull the entire past back in a single moment. The email began softly. My dear daughter, I saw your wonderful news. I always knew you were capable of great things. I stopped reading there. 4 years earlier, she had called me a lowly teacher. 4 years later, when that same profession put my name in the newspaper, she suddenly claimed she had always known I could do great things. There was no apology. Not one line about the WhatsApp message. Not a single sign that she understood what she had done. There was only an invitation to lunch on Mother's Day, as if 4 years of silence had been nothing more than a long business trip, and I had simply come home in time to sit at the table again. I did not reply. But the story did not end there. The next afternoon, Emily called me. Her voice was low and urgent, exactly like the night she had sent me the first screenshots. Olivia, you need to see this. My phone buzzed. A new screenshot appeared. This time it was from the family group chat, the same one I was still excluded from. My mother had written, Olivia will be honored at the State Education Awards ceremony next month. The media will be there. I have confirmed that the whole family will attend. We need to sit in the family section and look polished. Below it, Victoria replied, I'll wear the dark blue dress. Should I bring flowers? Daniel wrote, This is a good opportunity to show a united family. I'll clear my schedule. I read those 3 lines again and again. No one asked whether I wanted them there. No one asked how I had lived for the past 4 years. No one said we owe Olivia an apology. There were only dresses, flowers, media, and the image of a united family. If you have ever known people who only came back when you started becoming valuable in other people's eyes, comment too. Because sometimes what they miss is not you. It is the light around you. I handed the phone to Ethan. He read it, then set it down on the table very slowly. They're trying to turn your ceremony into their stage. I nodded. The most painful part was not that they had come back. It was that after 4 years, they still did not see me. They only saw an opportunity. That night, I called Emily back. She told me my mother had even contacted the organizers and asked to say a few words during the family portion of the event. She wanted to speak about raising Olivia, about how she had always believed in me and always stood behind me. When I heard that, I laughed. A quiet, tired laugh. She had not stood behind me. She had stood 4 years of silence away from me behind one message that erased my name and an entire family that agreed to turn their backs. Ethan asked if I wanted security to keep them out. I thought about it. But if I did, that the story they told would be predictable. Olivia was ungrateful. Olivia became successful and rejected her mother. Olivia did not know how to forgive. I did not want to step into their play. I wanted them to step into the truth on their own. So I said something to Ethan that even I did not expect myself to say so calmly. Let them come. He looked at me for a long moment. Are you sure? I closed the screenshot folder and placed my phone face down on the table. I'm sure. But they will not stand in the family section of my life. That night I wrote the first version of my speech. The opening line was very simple. I want to thank my family, the people who chose to stay when I had nothing left to prove. And when I finished writing that sentence, I knew. That ceremony would not be the day I took revenge. It would be the day I put everyone back where they truly belonged. The Virginia state capitol had never made me feel as small as it did that morning. The tall white stone columns, the wide staircase opening into a space where every footstep echoed clearly. I stood in the main hall, gently holding Lily's hand, Ethan beside me, and for the first time in many years, I felt nervous. Not because of the award, but because I knew they would come. Inside the auditorium, more than 500 seats were almost full. Teachers, principals, and education representatives from across the state filled the room. At the front was a large stage with the Department of Education emblem, cameras placed at different angles ready to capture every moment. I had been seated in the front row, the section reserved for immediate family. I sat between Ethan and Lily. She wore a tiny yellow dress, her feet swinging above the floor, constantly asking when it would be my turn to go on stage. I was answering her when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Excuse me, that is my daughter. I did not need to turn around to know who it was. My mother. She always had a way of making an entire room pay attention, without raising her voice. We need to sit in the family section, she continued, her tone, gentle but certain. Olivia Carter is my daughter. I took a breath. Slow. Deep. Then I kept looking straight ahead. They entered like a group that had been arranged in advance. My mother wore a cream-colored suit with her familiar pearl necklace around her neck. Victoria was in the fitted dark blue dress, exactly like she had mentioned in the group chat. Daniel wore a gray suit, polished and perfect as always. None of them looked like they were walking into a place where they were not welcome. They walked in as if they had always belonged there. I could feel their eyes resting on my back, waiting, expecting, as if all I had to do was turn around, smile, and say, "Hello, everyone," and those 4 years would automatically disappear. A hand touched my shoulder. I turned my head. Victoria. Olivia, she said, softly, her voice sweet as honey. You look wonderful today. I looked straight at her for a few seconds. No anga. No sarcasm. Just nothing left inside me that she could reach. Thank you, I said. Brief. Enough. Victoria froze slightly, as if she had expected more. Daniel leaned down, his voice low. Aren't you going to say hello to Mom? I turned back toward the stage. My family is sitting right here, I said, quiet enough that only they could hear, but clear enough that they could not pretend to misunderstand. No one said another word. but I knew that moment had changed everything. Not because I had spoken loudly, but because for the first time I was no longer trying to make them comfortable. The ceremony began. The host stepped onto the stage and introduced each category, each honoree. I heard my name mentioned in the opening segment, along with achievements I had spent years working for. Behind me, I heard whispers. My mother was speaking to the person beside her. She was always such a hard-working child. I always knew she would do great things. I closed my eyes for 1 second, not because it hurt, but because I realized she was still telling a story where she was the main character, a story where she had edited the past to fit the present. Ethan gently touched my hand. "Are you okay?" I opened my eyes. I nodded. "I'm okay." But in my mind, everything was becoming clearer than ever. They had not come here to apologize. They had not come here to make things right. They had come here to stand beside me when the lights came on. And in just a few minutes, those lights would shine directly on all of us. My name was called. This year's honoree, Olivia Carter. Applause filled the entire auditorium. I stood up and felt hundreds of eyes follow every step I took toward the stage. The lights shone directly into my eyes, blurring everything below, but I still knew exactly where they were sitting. Second row. Right behind the family I had chosen, I received the award from the Department of Education. Representatives shook hands, smiled, then stood in front of the microphone. A brief moment. Very brief. But enough for me to look back at the entire journey of the past 4 years. I took a breath. I would like to begin by saying thank you. My voice was steadier than I expected. I want to thank my colleagues who have stood by me, the students who have taught me the meaning of patience, and the people who believed in me, even when I did not believe in myself. I paused for a second. My eyes found Ethan, then Lily. And I want to thank my family. Below, I could feel a slight movement, a sense of anticipation, a certainty that their names would be called. My husband Ethan, who stood by me during the days I thought I had nothing left. I looked at him and smiled. My daughter Lily, who taught me what unconditional love truly means. I paused. No more names. No Margaret. No Victoria. No Daniel. Only silence. A very brief silence, but long enough for the entire room to realize what had just happened. Behind me, I heard chairs shifting. Then a voice broke through. Olivia. My mother. I did not turn around. "Did you forget your mother?" she said louder, her voice sweet but strained, as if she were performing for the cameras. I remained still. "I understand you may not want to talk about family on stage," she continued, stepping forward. "But I would just like to say a few words about your journey." I turned my head. For the first time since the ceremony began, my eyes met hers. No anger. No trembling. Just clarity. "Mrs. Carter," I said. The entire auditorium fell silent. No one spoke. No papers rustled. Only my voice carried through the microphone. "Thank you for coming." Her smile faltered. "But the part for family is already over." She stood frozen, as if she did not understand what had just happened. "Olivia, I am your." 4 years ago, I interrupted my voice. Still calm, you said you no longer considered me your daughter. A ripple of murmurs spread across the room. I did not need to raise my voice. Only to be clear. You said it in front of the entire family. And you asked everyone not to mention my name. I looked straight at her. So today, I am simply respecting your decision. No one applauded. No one spoke. Only a silence so heavy that everyone could feel it. A security staff member approached her, gently signaling. My mother did not resist. She just stood there for a few seconds, then stepped back. One step at a time. Her cream-colored dress was still as perfect as when she had walked in. But something was no longer intact. I turned back to the front, gripped the microphone. I am not standing here today to prove anything to anyone. My voice grew steadier. I am standing here because I chose a path that I believe is right. And I am fortunate that along that path I found people who chose to stay. I looked down at Lily. She was smiling at me. That is my family. A second of silence. Then one person stood and applauded. Then two. Then the entire room. The applause rose, spreading, filling the space. Not loud. Not chaotic. But like a wave. Slow, steady, undeniable. And in that moment I understood. It was not because I had spoken the truth. It was because for the first time, I was no longer afraid to say it. After the ceremony, I could not remember how many hands I had shaken. Teachers came to hug me. Principals held my hand tightly. An older woman stood in front of me for a long time, then quietly said she wished she had once had the courage to do the same with her own family. I listened to all of them, thanked all of them, but inside I felt an unfamiliar calm. Not the emptiness after a storm, but the calm of someone who had finally set something very heavy down. Just as I finished taking photos with the Department of Education representatives, my mother appeared at the end of the hallway. She did not walk the way she had when she entered the auditorium. The confidence of someone who believed she belonged in every room was gone. Victoria walked beside her, her face flushed with anger. Daniel kept his usual composed expression, but his jaw was clenched so tightly I could see it. Olivia, my mother called. I stopped. Ethan stood close beside me, and Lily held my hand a little tighter. We need to talk. In private, she said. I glanced around the hallway. A few people were still nearby. One reporter was even holding a notebook. If you have something to say, you can say it here. My mother's face paled. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. I looked at her for a long moment. No, I said. I only repeated what you had already said. Victoria stepped forward, her voice low but sharp. Do you have any idea what this is going to do? People are staring. They're talking. I do, I replied. It's not a pleasant feeling, is it? Having people question your worth. Victoria fell silent. Daniel tried to pull the conversation back into his usual controlled territory. Olivia, family matters should stay within the family. You made this public. I looked at him. Family, I repeated. 4 years ago, when Mom removed me from the group, what did you reply? Daniel said nothing. So I answered for him. Understood, Mom. Those 3 words landed in the hallway like a door slamming shut. My mother's lips trembled. I was angry back then. You know I didn't really mean it. I opened my phone and showed her the screenshot. 4 years of silence is not a moment of anger. No one responded. I put my phone back into my pocket, then spoke slowly. I don't need you to apologize in front of everyone. I don't need Victoria or Daniel to explain anything. But I do need all of you to understand that I am no longer the person who will rewrite the story just to make you comfortable. My mother looked at me as if for the first time she did not know how to use her authority as a parent. I turned to Ethan. Let's go home. Lily tugged gently on my hand. Mom, are you okay? I bent down and brushed her hair back. Ish. I'm okay. And the strange thing was, I truly was. I walked out of that building without feeling like I had won. I just felt free. 1 year after the ceremony, I received a letter. There was no return address. Only my name written in handwriting I recognized immediately. Margaret Carter. I held that letter for a long time before opening it. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew there are some things that once read never allow you to return to not knowing. Ethan sat across from me in the kitchen. He said nothing. He simply placed his hand on the table as if reminding me that I did not have to face anything alone. I opened the letter. 2 handwritten pages. I have written this letter many times, and every time I tried to find a reasonable excuse for what I did. But the truth is, there is no excuse. I stopped. I was afraid. Afraid of being judged. Afraid that your choices reflected my failure. And because of that fear, I chose to hurt you. I read to the end. No excuses. Only an apology that came too late. I do not expect you to forgive me. I only want you to know I was wrong. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer. I did not tear it up. I did not keep it close. I simply left it there. Ethan looked at me. What are you going to do? I shook my head gently. Not today. And for the first time in my life, I did not feel like I had to decide right away. No need to answer. No need to end it. No need to close anything. I looked out the window. The oak tree in the yard had changed color, golden leaves falling in thin layers. Lily was running around outside, laughing, loudly calling for me to come play with her. A very ordinary life. But it was the life I had chosen. I used to wonder a lot. How could a mother erase her own daughter? How could love be measured by status, by profession, by the way other people looked at you? I no longer search for those answers, because I have understood something more important. Their rejection never defined my worth. If you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting yourself, what would you choose? Comment, 1 or 2. I truly want to know your answer. I can understand my mother. I can see her fear. But understanding does not mean going back. Forgiveness does not mean opening the door. Family is not a place where you have to prove you are worthy of being loved. Family is a place where you are loved without needing to prove anything. It took me 30 years to understand that. But luckily, I still have the rest of my life to live by it.